The first time people saw her, they usually underestimated her. She was small, with silver hair coiled into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. Her brown hands were marked with the pale scars of old dishwater and work, her back a little bent from a lifetime of standing. Her skirts were always practical, her shoes always sensible. She carried her purse close and her head high. Her name was Ruth Henderson, though most folks in the neighborhood just called her Mama Ruth. On the day everything changed, she was standing at the bus stop on Ashbury and 12th, holding a reusable grocery bag and fanning herself with a folded church program. The morning sun was already high and hot, baking the sidewalks and making the city shimmer. Next to her, a group of young tech workers in logo jackets were laughing at something on a phone. Farther down the sidewalk, a luxury black car idled at the curb, its tinted windows reflecting the street like black mirrors. Ruth's eyes drifted to the car. She rolled them softly and murmured to herself, "That boy still ain't learned how to park like he got sense." Because she knew that car. Everyone on the block knew it. It belonged to Marcus King, the neighborhood's most famous resident. A self-made millionaire with a dozen apps under his name, a private chef, a personal trainer, and an ego that could block out the sun if it tried. Marcus had grown up not far from that same corner, in a cramped apartment above a laundromat. Now he lived in a penthouse downtown, but he kept the old house on Ashbury as an investment property. At least, that's what he called it. The neighborhood called it that place he never visits unless there's a camera. This, as it happened, was one of the rare days he decided to show his face. The car door opened, and Marcus stepped out. He wore a tailor navy suit that probably cost more than half the block's rent combined, though he smelled of expensive casual, fresh cologne, and leather. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but the smirk on his lips was more than visible. He checked his watch, glanced at his phone, then took in the scene with quick, dismissive sweeps. The cracked sidewalk, the faded bus sign, the grocery bags, the flyers taped to the lamppost. Finally, his gaze landed on the smallest person nearby. Ruth. He looked her over in a second, head to toe, toe to head, and then his smirk sharpened just a little. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, voice smooth from media training. "You waiting on the bus?" Ruth turned to him slowly, giving her knees time to catch up. She took her time answering. She'd earned that right 3 times over by living long enough. "I reckon I am," she said. "Unless you got wings hiding under that fancy suit." A couple of the tech workers snorted, quickly looking away. Marcus let out a polite laugh that didn't quite reach his face. "That's funny," he said. "No wings today. I've got a meeting over at the community center in a bit." He gestured vaguely down the street. "We're talking about renovation plans. Revitalizing the area, bringing in new businesses, opportunities, all that." "MH," Ruth nodded. "That's so. You finally here to ask folks what they want instead of telling them." This time, the tech workers didn't bother to hide their grins. Marcus's lips tightened for half a second, then relaxed again. He pushed his sunglasses up on his head, revealing sharp, calculating eyes. "And you are?" he asked. "Somebody who been here before you had that suit," she said. "And who'll be here when they put it in the Goodwill bin." He blinked, and then laughed, really laughed, surprised into it. It was a big sound, smooth and bright. "You're funny," he said. "I like you. I didn't ask you to." Her voice was mild. He tilted his head, studying her. Behind them, the low rumble of an approaching bus echoed faintly, still a few blocks away. "You live around here?" he asked. "Right over there." She nodded toward a brick building with peeling paint and flower boxes in the windows. "3rd floor. Been there 42 years. "Wow," Marcus whistled. 42. That's a long time. That's what happens if you don't die, she said simply. He chuckled again. "Can I ask you something, Ms. Henderson? But you can call me Mama Ruth. Everybody else does." "All right, Mama Ruth. Can I ask how you feel about the neighborhood changing? About gentrif? Well, about new people? New businesses?" She gave him a long look. "You want my real opinion, or the one you can put in your brochure?" This time, one of the tech workers actually choked on a sip of coffee. "The real one," Marcus said, still smiling, but there was an edge of seriousness now. "I can handle it. We'll see." She shifted her grocery bag to the other hand. "Change ain't the problem. Change is all we ever get. Question is who it's for and who it leaves behind." That's exactly what I'm trying to. She held up a hand. Don't preach to me, boy. I see more revitalization than you've seen birthdays. Sometimes they fix a building and break a neighborhood. The bus was still a block away. Marcus looked at her, then at the car, then back at her. Something thoughtful flickered behind his eyes. I'm hosting a small event today, he said suddenly. At the community center. A sort of round table. A few investors, some city officials, some community voices. He spread his hands like that last part was his idea. You should come. I got groceries in this bag, not free time, she said. And I ain't dressed for no event. I'll cover whatever's in your bag, he said smoothly. And trust me, you're more than dressed enough. You're probably the most authentic person who'd be in that room. MH, she gave him a long, slow look. You ain't gonna put me on no flyer, are you? Not without asking, he said, hand over heart. Scout's honor. She snorted. You don't look like you ever camped a day in your life. Glamping, he corrected, grinning. Come on, just 1 hour. Say whatever you like. If you hate it, you can leave and tell everyone I wasted your time. She watched him for a moment. The bus was close now. She could hear the brakes squeal as it pulled up at the stop before theirs. But she also saw something else, the way the tech workers glanced over, curious. The way Marcus shifted from foot to foot with a strange mix of confidence and impatience. There was a chance here, a chance to be heard, a chance to say, out loud, what her generation had been saying in kitchens and pews and hair salons for years. You want my real voice in that room? She asked. Yes. Not the polite one. Especially not that one, he said. Ruth sighed and adjusted her purse strap. Fine, but I'm not missing my stories tonight, so you keep an eye on the clock. Deal. He smiled in victory and gestured to the car. Let me give you a ride. She gave the bus, now just 2 buildings away, one last wistful look. Then she squared her shoulders and walked toward the black car like she'd been stepping into limousines her whole life. Inside the car, the leather seats were soft and cool. Ruth sank into one with a small sigh. Lord, this is nicer than my first apartment, she muttered. Marcus slid in beside her across the back seat, tapping a quick command on a built-in tablet. The car eased away from the curb, purring like a big cat. So, he said, turning toward her, tell me about yourself, Mama Ruth. What do you do? I'm retired, she said. From what? A lot of things. Housekeeping, waitressing, nursing assistant. I was a library clerk for a while, too. That was my favorite. Books don't yell at you. He smiled. You ever think about getting into tech? Coding, maybe? You seem sharp. Quick. She laughed. Baby, when I was your age, tech meant the new toaster that didn't burn your bread. Nobody was asking little black girls from the South if they wanted to build robots. He shifted, his expression softening a bit. Yeah, he said quietly. I get that. I doubt you do, she said, but not unkindly. He watched her for a moment. So what do you do now? Hobbies? Volunteer work? I read, she said. I cook. I fuss at the TV. I keep an eye on folks' kids. I go to church. I teach, sometimes. Teach what? He asked. She paused. Languages. He raised an eyebrow. Languages? Like English. She gave him a flat look that would have made a less confident man sink into the seat. English, she said, and 8 others. He blinked. Wait, you speak 9 languages. I speak them, she said. Don't always get to use them. Folks barely listen to old ladies in one tongue. He burst into laughter. 9? Come on. She turned her head to look out the window. The city slid by. Murals, corner stores, a school with peeling paint. She watched it like a movie she'd seen 100 times, still noticing new details. What's funny? She asked. I mean, he wiped at his eyes, still chuckling. 9? That's no disrespect, but that sounds like one of those things you see people say online. My grandma speaks 12 languages and invented Wi-Fi. I don't know what a Wi-Fi is, she said calmly. But I know what I know. Okay, he said, amusement sharpening. Sorry, but I've flown all over the world. I meet people every day who barely speak the one language they were born into. And you're telling me you speak 9? Boy, she said, people underestimate how much you learn when you actually listen. He smiled in that way rich men do when they think they've caught someone in a lie they're too polite to call out. All right then, Professor, he said lightly. Which ones? She folded her hands in her lap, fingers lacing together neatly. English, she began. French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Arabic, Swahili, Mandarin, and a bit of Russian, though it's rusty. His smile froze. Seriously, he asked. Serious as taxes, she said. He burst out laughing again, unable to help himself. That's okay. That's wild. Wild as building a coffee shop on every corner and calling it culture, she said. This is just learning. You learned all that where? On YouTube, he teased. On what? He blinked. Never mind. The car hummed to a stop at a red light. Outside, a food cart vendor arranged paper plates with practiced hands. A group of school kids jaywalked while giggling. So you don't believe me, she said. He shrugged, grinning. Look, if you do, that's incredible. Unbelievable, really. But 9 is a big number. I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, and all I can say is where's the bathroom and I like tacos. That just means you wasn't paying attention, she said. The car rolled forward again. Tell you what, he said. When we get to the center, maybe we can test it out. We've got some international investors there today. People from all over. If you're right, they'll love you. If not, he spread his hands like it was all a joke. No harm done. She looked at him sideways. You planning on turning me into a game show? Not at all, he said. Just a demonstration. For fun. MH. She turned to the window again. You can test me if it makes you feel big, she said. Just remember, I'm not the one in need of proving. He opened his mouth, shut it, then leaned back and looked out his own window instead. The community center was cleaner than it used to be, but felt emptier somehow. The old scuff marks on the floors had been polished out, the faded bulletin boards replaced with sleek digital ones. There were new chairs, new tables, new lights, everything subtle, tasteful, and a little cold. As they walked in together, Ruth felt memories tug at her from every direction. Over there, she'd cooked vats of collard greens for church fundraisers. Over there, she'd organized a tutoring program, pulling kids who'd fallen behind back toward the light of possibility. On that stage, she'd watched a dozen shy teenagers find courage in school plays. And now, the room was set up like a startup's dream. White tablecloths, tiny potted plants, a projector screen with the words Ashbury Future Summit splashed across it. Lord, she murmured. They done put lipstick on the building and forgot to feed the people inside. What was that? Marcus asked. Nothing you ready to hear yet, she said. At the far end of the room, clusters of people in suits and smart casual outfits milled around, nursing coffee and sparkling water. There were name tags in multiple languages, translation headsets on a table, a tray of tiny sandwiches on a sideboard. As soon as they entered, a woman in a charcoal blazer and sharp bob haircut approached, tablet in hand. Marcus, she said. There you are. We're almost ready to start. The deputy mayor's here, the folks from the development fund are in the back, and the international delegation just arrived. Great, he said. This is Mama Ruth. She's a community leader from the neighborhood. Ruth raised an eyebrow slightly at that title, but said nothing. The woman gave her a quick, polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Wonderful, she said. We're so happy you could join us. Then, to Marcus, I'll slot her into the local perspective segment. 5 minutes, okay. Let's make it 10, he said. You'll see why. The woman hesitated. The schedule is pretty tight, Marcus. 10, he repeated, his tone soft but firm. She sighed, tapped something on her tablet, and nodded. Fine. 10. The translation team is ready if she needs help. She won't, he said. The woman gave him a puzzled look, but moved off to greet another guest. Marcus turned to Ruth. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? One of those tiny sandwiches that act like they're food. I ate already, she said. But I'll take some water. He guided her to a table near the front, poured a glass from a pitcher, and set it in front of her with an oddly careful gesture, like he was placing something on an altar. Just watch for a bit, he said. We'll get to your part soon. I've been watching a long time, boy, she said, but I'll keep doing it. I'm good at that. The event began with the usual fanfare. A host in a crisp suit welcomed everyone, thanked the sponsors, and talked about the exciting future of Ashbury, while slides of glossy apartment renderings flashed on screen. There were charts showing rising property values, graphs of projected tax revenue, photos of gleaming coffee shops and yoga studios. Next came a city official who promised safeguards and equitable development, and a polished investor who spoke about unlocking hidden value in historically underutilized neighborhoods. Ruth listened, hands folded, face unreadable. She noticed what they didn't show: no slides of the families who'd lived there for generations, no charts of the rising rents, no photos of the corner barber shop that had closed after 50 years. Marcus spoke next. At least, to his credit, he started with honesty. "I grew up 3 blocks from here," he said, pacing slightly as he spoke. "I've seen this neighborhood at its best and its worst. I've seen boarded-up stores, gunshots at night, bad schools. I've also seen block parties that felt like magic, neighbors watching each other's kids, and small businesses that held up whole families." He talked about his journey, the first computer he'd ever used at this very center, the first coding class he'd taken, the scholarship that got him out of a bad school and into a better one. "I want this neighborhood to rise," he said, voice warming. "I want it to be a place where kids like me and kids not like me can walk to a good school, eat at a nice restaurant, live in a safe building. I want my success story not to be the exception, but one of many." People nodded. A few even clapped. "But," he continued, "I also know there's a danger in building a future that erases the past. That's why we're here, to shape something that's both new and true to what's always made this place special." Ruth's head tilted slightly. That, she thought, was at least half a good sentence. "And to do that," he said, "we need to hear from everyone, especially the people who've held this community up for decades." He turned toward her. "That's why I invited someone very special today. She's lived here for 42 years. She's worked, raised families, and seen changes most of us only read about. And, as I've just learned, she also claims to speak 9 languages." Soft laughter rippled through the room. Ruth closed her eyes briefly. So, this was how he was going to play it. Marcus grinned. "I'll be honest, when she told me that, I laughed. 9 languages? It sounded impossible." He paused, letting the amusement hang in the air. "But if it's true, then we're all in the presence of someone extraordinary. And if it's not, well, we still get to hear from a pillar of the community." More laughter. It wasn't cruel, exactly. More a casual disbelief, the kind people reserve for something too unusual to take seriously. Marcus gestured toward her. "Mama Ruth, would you come up here?" She rose slowly, every movement deliberate. Her knees ached, but she'd learned a long time ago that you never show pain to people who expect you to fold. As she walked to the front, the host hurried to adjust the microphone. She ignored the mic for a moment, scanning the room with steady eyes. She saw faces, skeptical, curious, distracted, impatient. A man in an expensive suit glanced at his phone. A woman in a bright scarf leaned forward, genuinely interested. A young volunteer near the back looked relieved to see someone who wasn't polished in plastic. Finally, Ruth took the microphone. "Good afternoon," she said. Her voice came out stronger than some had expected. "Good afternoon," a few people echoed automatically. "Well now," she said. "Seems I've been introduced as some kind of legend." She smiled faintly. "My knees don't feel legendary, but I'll tell you what I know." A polite hush settled over the room. "You all talking about the future," she said. "Apartments and businesses and tax money. That's fine. You should talk about those things. But where I come from, you don't build a house without checking the ground you're standing on. So let's talk about that ground for a moment." She saw Marcus watching her intently, arms crossed. "This neighborhood," she said, "been through a lot. The people here know how to survive. They know how to stretch a paycheck, how to keep kids out of trouble when there's nothing for them to do, how to turn a pot of beans into a feast. They also know what it feels like when folks come in with big ideas and forget to ask who's already here." She looked slowly around the room, making eye contact with people who were still half convinced she was some cute prop. "I'm not against change," she continued. "I'm against being treated like I'm in the way of it." That line made a few people shift in their seats. "You see, those charts you showed," she said, nodding toward the screen. "They got numbers for property values, but not for how many families had to move when the rent went up. They got graphs for revenue, but not for how many small businesses closed when the fancy stores came in. We measure some things and act like the rest don't matter. Marcus frowned slightly, thoughtful. And as for me speaking 9 languages, she said, and the room perked up, let me tell you something about that. Folks act like it's a magic trick. They don't see it for what it is, work and necessity. She let the microphone fall slightly away from her lips, then raised it again. In clear, gentle French, she said, I grew up in a world that did not expect me to travel. But language allowed me to travel without moving my feet. Several heads snapped up. A man near the front, a visitor from Paris, straightened, surprised. Without missing a beat, she continued in Spanish, words smooth and warm. I worked in kitchens where everyone spoke differently, and I learned because no one could afford misunderstandings when the stove is hot and the knives are sharp. One of the investors from Madrid blinked, then smiled, elbowing his colleague. She shifted easily into Portuguese. I cleaned hotel rooms where guests forgot I existed when they talked, and I listened. Not to pry, but because understanding made me safer. A woman from Sao Paulo stared at her, wide-eyed. Switching to Italian, she said, in every room, in every job, they thought I didn't hear. But I heard everything. And one day, I realized that every sentence was another brick in a house of my own understanding. The translator team at the back stared at each other, nervously fiddling with their headsets. Then, in precise, measured Arabic, she said, I worked with refugees, women who had lost everything and still had the courage to start again. I wanted to greet them in their own tongue, so they knew they were not invisible here. A man in a suit with a lapel pin sat up suddenly, eyes brightening in recognition. He murmured something to his neighbor. She turned slightly, speaking flowing Swahili. I took care of children whose parents spoke to them in one language and to the world in another. I learned the words they whispered at night when they thought no one could hear, so I could comfort them in the language of their dreams. A visitor from Nairobi put a hand over her mouth, astonished, and then began to clap before catching herself. Now she shifted again, her tone changing as she used careful Mandarin. I met elders in parks, sitting alone on benches, forgotten in a country that never bothered to learn their names. I sat with them, and we traded stories. We didn't always share the same past, but we met in the space between our words. A younger man at the back, part of an Asian delegation, blinked hard and then pulled out his phone to record. Ruth paused, then added a few sentences in halting but sincere Russian, shaking her head as she did. This one is rusty. I have not practiced, but I remember enough to say that everyone, everywhere, wants to be heard. The room had gone utterly still. Even those who didn't understand the words felt something in the rhythm, the intention. Languages wove through the air like threads, connecting people who moments before had been united only by name tags and catering. Ruth switched back to English, her own everyday music returning. You see, she said quietly, the world assumes old black women know how to cook, how to clean, how to pray. It doesn't assume we know how to say I hear you in 9 different tongues. A few people laughed softly, but the sound was tinged with something new, respect. Marcus was no longer smirking. He looked like someone who had been ready to applaud a magic trick, and instead found himself in the presence of a storm. I didn't learn all that sitting in some fancy classroom, she continued. I learned because I had to. Because when you're holding the mop, you hear everything. When you're the one they overlook, you see everything. And if you pay attention long enough, you start to understand patterns of speech, of behavior, of power. She gestured toward the slides, still frozen on the screen behind her. And that's what I'm asking y'all to do with this neighborhood, she said. Learn its language. Not just the numbers you can put in a report. The real language. The rhythm of kids on the playground. The way old folks sit on the stoop and greet everybody walking by. The way the corner store owner extends credit to the lady who's short this week because he knows she'll be back on Friday. Her voice deepened. Don't just speak profit and expect us to understand. Speak respect. Speak collaboration. Speak we will not push you out. And then back those words up with leases people can afford and contracts that go to folks who've been here. A murmur of agreement ran through the few community members scattered in the back rows. Even some of the officials shifted in their seats. You want to revitalize? She asked. Start by listening. Hold meetings at times when folks just getting off work, not in the middle of the day. Provide childcare so parents can come. Translate your flyers into the languages people actually speak here. Put your plans in plain words, not legal maze talk that hides the catch in the fine print. She took a breath. The microphone trembled slightly in her hand, her age catching up with her body even as her mind burned sharp as ever. And if you're serious about including us, she said, then don't just invite us as decoration. Give us a vote. Put us on the boards that make decisions. Let us veto ideas that look good on paper but feel like eviction in real life. She turned her head slowly until her gaze rested on Marcus. You got all this money, all this power, she said. That's fine. I ain't mad at you for being successful. But don't you dare forget the language of where you came from. Don't make speeches about community and then build a future where we gotta move 2 hours away to find a place we can afford. The room was dead silent. After a long moment, Ruth smiled faintly, the hard edges of her expression softening. As for my languages, she added, I'll tell you this. Anyone can learn to say hello in 9 tongues. The real skill is learning how to say we belong and mean it. With that, she lowered the microphone. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then one pair of hands started clapping, the woman in the bright scarf. Then another joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the room was full of applause, not the polite kind they'd given earlier, but something deeper, more insistent. A few people even stood. Ruth felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't bow. She'd never liked bowing. Instead, she gave a single nod, turned, and walked back to her seat. As she sat down, she noticed Marcus still standing at the front, his expression somewhere between awe and shame. He picked up the microphone slowly. Well, he said, his voice a little hoarse. I was not prepared for that. Soft laughter rippled through the room. I joked earlier about testing her, he said. Looks like I'm the one who got tested. More laughter, but this time it was kinder, and he took it in with a nod. What you just heard, he continued, gesturing toward Ruth, is exactly what I meant when I said we need to hear from the people who built this place. Not as an afterthought, not as a checkbox, but as partners. He paused, and something shifted in his face. So, I want to propose a change. Right now, all eyes were on him. The board overseeing this project is made up of investors, city officials, and representatives from my company, he said. That's going to change. I'm committing, right now, that we will add at least 3 long-term residents of this neighborhood to that board, with full voting power. There was a small stir in the room. This was more concrete than the usual vague promises. And I'd like to ask, he said carefully, turning toward her, if Mama Ruth would be willing to be one of them. There was a beat of silence. Then half the room broke into applause again. Ruth stared at him, eyebrows raised. She had not expected that. Don't answer now, he said quickly. Think about it. Talk to your neighbors. Tell me if there's someone better. But I promise you this, from today on, there won't be any closed-door meetings where your voices aren't present. He exhaled. Because she's right. If we don't learn the language of this community, we're not building anything. We're just repainting. He stepped back, and the host hurried to retake control of the program, clearly flustered but trying to look smooth. The rest of the summit went on. Discussions, presentations, questions. But the energy in the room had changed. People looked at the charts differently. They referenced things Ruth had said. Some of the investors, who had arrived thinking about profit margins, now found themselves thinking about childhood homes and the sound of their own grandparents' voices. As for Ruth, she sat quietly, sipping her water, listening. She no longer felt invisible in that room. Afterward, as people mingled and exchanged business cards, a line formed in front of her table. The man from Paris approached first, beaming. Incredible, he said in accented English. Your French is beautiful. Where did you learn? In a hotel kitchen and a library, she said. And from a girl whose mama didn't want her talking to me at first. He laughed. Well, I'm glad she did. The woman from Sao Paulo came next, praising her Portuguese. The visitor from Kenya clasped her hand and thanked her for the Swahili, eyes shining. The man with the lapel pin told her that her Arabic had made him think of his grandfather's village. One by one, they came, not just to marvel at her skills, but to share stories of their own. For a few precious minutes, the community center felt like the city it had always wanted to be, a place where all those languages and lives could exist in one room, equal and heard. Marcus waited until the line thinned before approaching. He slid into the chair next to her with an uncharacteristic lack of swagger, leaning his elbows on the table. "Well," he said softly, "you made me look like a fool." "Good," she said. He blinked, then laughed, taken off guard. "I deserve that," he admitted. "I really did think you were exaggerating. I've met CEOs with fewer skills than you just casually showed off." She said. "You laughed when I told you what I knew." "I did," he said. "I'm sorry." She gave him a sideways look. "You sorry because I proved you wrong, or because you were wrong in the first place?" He thought about that longer than she expected. "Both," he said finally. "Mostly the second." She nodded slowly. "That's a start." He cleared his throat. "I meant what I said up there. About the board. About you being on it. I know it sounded impulsive, but I've been thinking about something like that for a while. You push me to stop thinking and actually commit. You want an old lady with 9 languages to sit in a room full of rich people and tell them, when they being stupid?" She asked. "Yes," he said. "Very much." She chuckled. "I'll consider it. But I got conditions." He leaned in, suddenly wary. "Okay, let's hear them." "First," she said, counting on her fingers, "I'm not your token. If I come, I'm bringing other voices with me. Not physically in the room, maybe, but in what I say. I'm not going to sit there and just nod while y'all pat each other on the back. I will fuss. I expect you to," he said. "I think we need that." "Second," she continued, "you're going to put money where your mouth is. You can't build nothing for kids and then not have a budget for after-school programs. I want to see numbers for that, not just pretty renderings of apartments nobody here can afford." He nodded. "Done. We'll draft a plan." "Third," she added, "I get a ride to the meetings. My knees hate your parking garage stairwell." He laughed again, louder this time. "Consider done. I'll send the car myself." She watched him for a moment, her gaze softening. "And last," she said quietly, "I want you to come to the neighborhood not just as a businessman, but as somebody's child. Knock on doors without cameras following you. Sit on the stoop and listen to the stories your people still got to tell. Don't just remember this place when it's convenient." His smile faded into something more serious. "I can do that," he said. "I need to do that." "Yes, you do," she said. They sat in silence for a moment, watching people file out of the hall. The tech workers from the bus stop passed by, waving awkwardly at her. She waved back, amused. "You know," Marcus said slowly, "my grandfather used to say something about language. He told me if you only speak one, you only live one life. If you learn more, you get to borrow pieces of other people's lives for a while." "That's true," she said. He sounded like a smart man. "He was," Marcus said softly. "I wish he could have heard you today." She glanced at him. Maybe he did. He smiled a little. Maybe. He hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something a bit personal?" "You can ask," she said. "I might not answer." "Fair," he said. "When you were learning all those languages, did you ever get frustrated? Feel like it was useless? That no one cared?" She thought back to long nights with borrowed textbooks, to scribbled vocabulary lists on scraps of paper, to the sting of mocking laughter when she mispronounced something. "Oh, I got frustrated plenty," she said. "I wanted to quit 1,000 times. But every time I used a new word and saw someone's face light up, it felt like a little victory. Like I cracked a door open that the world had tried to weld shut." She looked at him pointedly. "Just like today." He exhaled, shaking his head. "You really are something, you know that." "I do," she said. "Took me a long time to believe it, but I do." He smiled, then stood, offering his arm. "Come on, Mama Ruth," he said. "Let's get you home. And on the way, maybe you can teach me how to say, 'I'm sorry I doubted you' in at least one of those languages." She slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, letting him help her up. "Just one?" she asked. "Baby, you got a lot more apologizing to do than that." He laughed, shaking his head. "All right then. Start with the easiest one." "There ain't no easy one," she said as they walked toward the doors. "But we'll start with the one you most need. How to say 'I'm listening' and mean it." The next few months were not simple. There were arguments in boardrooms and on street corners. Heated meetings in church basements and long email chains where people used big words to hide their fear. Some investors pulled out when they realized the project would prioritize affordable housing over maximum profit. Some residents distrusted every promise, no matter how well-intentioned. Through it all, Ruth sat at the table. She read proposals line by line, sometimes slowly, lips moving, tracing each word with a finger, but she read them. She asked questions that cut through jargon like it was cobweb. She told stories about families who would be affected by every line item. When the development company suggested a sleek cafe chain for the corner lot, she replied in crisp, unyielding terms. "No," she said. "There's a woman 3 streets over who's been running a bakery out of her kitchen for 10 years. Give her a storefront. You want authentic. There it is." When a consultant proposed a cultural district featuring curated murals, she shook her head. "You don't curate something that's already living," she said. "Hire the artists that have been painting on these walls since before you learn how to spell artisanal, and pay them right." Once, when a visiting investor from overseas spoke dismissively about these people in his own language, assuming no one else understood, she slipped into that same language and replied. "These people have names," she said sharply, "and memories, and rent due next month. Put some respect on that." The man went pale. Marcus watched all this with a mixture of pride and humility. He messed up sometimes, said the wrong thing in the wrong way, underestimated the depth of people's anger. But slowly he learned. He started walking the neighborhood on Sunday afternoons, without cameras, just him and a notebook. He sat on stoops, listened to old stories. He visited the after-school program at the center and ended up staying to help a teenager debug his first app. Sometimes he and Ruth argued, loudly, their voices carrying down the hallway outside the boardroom. People flinched at first, then realized that in an odd way, the arguments were a sign of progress. You don't fight that hard about something you don't care deeply about. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting, Marcus slumped in a chair next to her as she packed her things. "You ever get tired of fighting?" he asked. She considered. "Tired," she said. "All the time. That's why I take my naps serious." "But done?" "No, not yet." He sighed. "I thought having money would make this easier." "That's your problem," she said. "You thought money was the language everybody speaks. It ain't. Folks speak fear, pride, hurt, hope. You gotta translate between all that. Money's just an accent." He laughed weakly. "I'm still learning." "You better," she said, "or I'll start charging you for lessons." A year later, the corner lot had a bakery with a hand-painted sign and a line out the door on Sunday mornings. The apartment building that went up had more units reserved for long-time residents than any similar development in the city. The community center's after-school program had doubled in size, funded not by leftover pennies, but by a dedicated chunk of the project's budget. The changes weren't perfect, and they didn't fix everything. Some families still had to move farther out. Some landlords hiked rent despite new policies. The city's problems were bigger than one project, but there were victories, real ones. On an ordinary Tuesday, as the sun dipped low over Ashbury, Ruth sat on the same bus stop bench where she'd first met Marcus. Her grocery bag rested at her feet. A little girl from the second floor, hair in puffballs, backpack hanging low, bounced onto the bench beside her. "Hi, Mama Ruth," the girl chirped. "Guess what?" "What, baby?" "I learned how to say hello in 3 languages today," the girl announced proudly. "We're doing a language project in school. Teacher says we should pick somebody from our community who speaks another language and ask them to teach us." "Is that so?" Ruth asked, hiding a smile. "Uh-huh." The girl swung her legs. "Already picked you. Just like that? Didn't even ask me first?" The girl giggled. "You'll say yes." "Oh, will I now?" Ruth teased. "You very sure of yourself?" The girl nodded, so hard her beads clicked. "You can teach me all 9. Ruth laughed, a deep, rolling sound. "That'll take more than one project," she said. "But we can start." The girl grinned up at her. "Will you teach me how to say I belong?" Ruth's laughter softened into a smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, baby," she said. "I can teach you that in any language you want." She looked down the street, where the bakery's lights glowed warm, where kids rode bikes near a building that had once been boarded up and now held a community clinic, where the community center sign listed both coding classes and dance workshops. She thought of the day a rich man had laughed when she said she was a multilingual old woman. She remembered the look on his face when she answered the world in 9 voices. He still visited the neighborhood, still made mistakes, still learned. He and Ruth still argued sometimes, still worked side by side more often than not. He'd stopped treating her like a surprising footnote and started treating her like what she'd always been, a leader. "Okay," she said to the little girl, shifting on the bench to face her. First lesson. In French, you can say, "Je suis à ma place." That means, more or less, I am where I'm meant to be. Repeat that after me. The girl stumbled adorably through the syllables, giggling when she messed up, trying again with fierce determination. Cars rolled past. The city hummed, alive in all its imperfect, multilingual chaos. Ruth listened, corrected, encouraged. And, as she did, she felt something settle in her chest, something like pride, something like peace. She had spent a lifetime being underestimated. A lifetime listening from the edges of rooms where she wasn't supposed to have a voice. A lifetime collecting words that the world didn't think belonged to her. Now, at last, she was using them exactly where they were needed. People still laughed sometimes when they heard her claim. "I speak 9 languages," she would say, and now she let them laugh. Because she knew how the story ended. Not with their laughter, but with the moment they ran out of words, and she still had plenty left, enough to build bridges, to demand justice, to tell a neighborhood that it deserved to exist in its own tongue. Enough to leave even a millionaire speechless.